Look at the quarry floor at Baalbek in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. There's a single block of limestone lying there, half-cut, still connected to the bedrock. It weighs around 1,650 tons. A German archaeological team confirmed it in 2014, the largest stone ever cut by human hands. Nobody moved it. Nobody could. Above it sit 3 more blocks, each around 800 tons, fitted so tightly a knife blade won't slip between them. The official answer is Roman engineering. But at the southern end of this same valley stands a mountain, and a banned book names it. That mountain is Mount Hermon. Today they call it Jabal al-Sheikh. It rises about 2,800 meters on the border of Lebanon and Syria, the highest peak of the anti-Lebanon range, the same range that walls in the valley where those impossible stones are sitting. From the quarry you can see the snow on its summit. And here's the thing most people never hear. That mountain isn't famous for its height. It's famous for what an ancient text says happened on top of it, a text that got cut out of the Bible. So let's start with the stones, because the stones are the part nobody can wave away. Baalbek was called Heliopolis in the Greco-Roman world. Mainstream archaeology is clear. The Temple of Jupiter that sits there was built by Rome, 1st to 3rd century AD. That much is solid. But the temple sits on a platform, and the platform includes blocks that weigh more than any structure has a reason to. The trilithon, 3 of them, roughly 800 tons apiece, lifted about 7 meters off the ground and set into the wall with joints so precise they still hold after 2,000 years. Now, engineers will tell you the Romans could move these. The quarry sits slightly uphill from the temple, so gravity helped. Rollers, earthen ramps, thousands of men, that's the answer. And it's a good answer. It's just not a complete one. Because the exact method, how you lift an 800-ton block 7 meters into the air and place it to knife blade tolerance, is still argued over in academic circles. There's no single accepted mechanism. Watch that gap, we're going to come back to it. Because someone cut a stone weighing 1,600 tons and then left it in the ground. You don't cut a stone you can't lift, unless you thought you could. Now the text. The Book of Enoch. Most people were never handed it, and that's not an accident. It's an ancient Jewish work, written somewhere between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. The section that matters is called the Book of the Watchers. It reads like the director's cut of Genesis chapter 6, the strange, compressed passage about the sons of God taking human wives and fathering giants. Genesis gives you 4 cryptic verses. Enoch gives you names, motives, a date, and a location. And it was cut out. It's not in the Jewish canon. It's not in the Catholic or Protestant Bible. The only tradition that kept it whole is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. For a long time you could dismiss that. A weird apocryphal book preserved in one corner of the world, easy to ignore. Then 1947 happened. Because among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, they found it. In the original Aramaic, not one copy, over 20 Enoch fragments, making it one of the best attested texts in the entire library, sitting in the same jars as Isaiah and Deuteronomy. This wasn't a medieval invention, it was already ancient when the scrolls were sealed. So read what it actually says. Chapter 6. 200 of them, the text calls them watchers, descend to earth. And it tells you where. They descended, it says, on the summit of Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. 200. A named peak. A specific generation. That is not how metaphor usually opens. That's how a report opens. And then it names the mountain twice. Look closely, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. The text says they called it Mount Hermon because they swore an oath there. In Hebrew, the root behind Hermon, herem, means a ban, a curse, a binding oath. The mountain is named after the crime committed on it. And the generation? Jared. In Hebrew, Jared means descent. The man is named after the act. The place is named after the act. One of those could be folk etymology, a coincidence. But 2 matched names in the same sentence, both pointing at the same event, that starts to strain. The writer isn't reaching for a symbol, he's explaining why a place has the name it has, the way a survey record explains a landmark. Then it names the children. This is the part the title is built on. There's a second text tied to the same tradition called the Book of Giants, also found at Qumran, also in Aramaic. And there were around 10 copies of it there. It was one of the most popular texts the community owned. It doesn't describe giants as a fog of legend. It gives them names. Oya, Haya, Mahaweh, sons of the watcher Shemehazah, and one more name buried in the fragments that stops scholars cold. Gilgamesh, the hero of the oldest epic in the world, listed here as one of the giants. These aren't abstractions. They have fathers, they have brothers, they argue, they have dreams. Visions of a coming flood, of a tablet wiped clean of every name but Noah's. You don't give a metaphor a first name and a nightmare. You give those to a person. Whoever wrote this was writing about individuals he believed were real. And then the text does something a simple should never do. It builds a prison. In chapter 10, the punishment comes. And listen to the verbs, because the verbs are physical. Bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert. In a place called Dudael, throw him in, pile rough and jagged rocks on top of him. Cover his face so he cannot see the light, and leave him there until the day of judgment, when he'll be thrown into fire. Bind, open, cast down, cover. Those aren't feelings. That's a location and a set of actions, a named desert, a pit cut into the ground, rocks placed on top. This is the same book the New Testament reaches for. 2 Peter uses the word Tartarus for exactly this imprisonment. The tradition even placed Dudael east of Jerusalem. They didn't think it was a mood. They thought it was a spot on the map. Now, the official reading of all of this is that it's symbolic, apocalyptic myth. The mountain is dramatic staging, the giants are a moral warning about corruption, the pit is a spiritual image of judgment, and taken one piece at a time, that reading holds. Any single detail can be softened into metaphor. But that's the problem. It's not one detail, it's a named peak on a real mountain range that overlooks a valley. It's giants with individual names and family lines. It's a desert pit described with construction verbs. It's a specific generation. Line them up and something shifts. One detail is metaphor, two is coincidence. But when the same tradition hands you geography, movement, naming, boundaries, and a pit in the ground, all clustered on one strip of land, the symbolic reading stops explaining the specificity. It just relabels it. And that strip of land is the same one holding the largest cut stones on Earth. The Oath Mountain and the Impossible Quarry sit on the same range, less than 40 kilometers apart. The text didn't wander into geography at the end, it started there. Which brings us back to the stones, and to the newest piece of the puzzle. That 1,650-ton block, the one confirmed in 2014, didn't just break a record. It reopened a question that archaeology thought it had closed. Because we now have a hard fact and a soft explanation sitting side by side. The fact. 3 800-ton blocks, raised 7 meters, placed to perfect tolerance. And nearby, 3 more monoliths abandoned in the quarry, each heavier than the last. 1,000 tons, 1,200, 1,650. The soft explanation? The Romans meant to move them and gave up. Maybe. But gave up tells you why they stopped cutting. It doesn't tell you how the ones already in the wall got up there. The engineering answer covers most of the site. It doesn't fully cover the largest blocks. The newest dig didn't quiet the mystery. It made it louder. And here's where the text plays a trick on us. A translation trap that cuts both ways. The Book of Enoch tells you how big the giants were, chapter 7. And the number depends entirely on which manuscript you're reading. The Ethiopic version says 300 cubits, around 450 feet. The Greek tradition says 3,000 cubits, 10 times taller. And the oldest witness, the Aramaic fragment from Qumran, may not preserve that number at all. In some translations, the height is printed in brackets, meaning it wasn't found in the earliest text. It was borrowed in from a later version. Sit with that. The single most outrageous claim in the whole story, the impossible size, might be a later exaggeration, a number that grew in the retelling. And that actually makes the rest harder to dismiss, not easier. Because if you strip out the cartoon height, you're not left with nothing. You're left with the names, the mountain, the pit, the geography. The parts that read like a record don't depend on the parts that read like a tall tale. Somebody softened or inflated the very line skeptics point to first, and left the survey details untouched. So where does Atlantis come in? Because that's the word in the title, and you deserve the truth about it. Here it is, straight. The Book of Enoch never says Atlantis. Not once. Atlantis comes from Plato, two Greek dialogues written around 360 BC. And Plato placed his lost civilization out beyond the Pillars of Hercules, past Gibraltar, in the Atlantic. That is a completely different tradition on a completely different map. What happened is that modern writers looked at Enoch's world, an advanced, corrupted civilization before a great flood, wiped off the earth by water, and looked at Plato's Atlantis, an advanced civilization destroyed by cataclysm, and decided they were the same story. Then they took the name Atlantis and pinned it onto Enoch's drowned world. And because Enoch's drowned world is anchored to Mount Hermon in the Bekaa Valley, the pin landed here, on Baalbek. Now that does not mean giants built these stones. There's no evidence a race of giants quarried Baalbek. And mainstream archaeology is right that the temple is Roman. Strip the word Atlantis away entirely. Throw out the ancient aliens. Throw out the lost technology. You are still left with something that doesn't dissolve. The oldest detailed account of a pre-flood civilization of giants places their origin on one specific mountain. And the largest stones humanity ever cut sit in the valley that mountain looks down on. Nobody had to invent that overlap. It's just on the map. That's the part that keeps this from being easy to laugh off. Not the theory bolted on top of it, the geography underneath it. You can delete every fringe author and the mountain is still there. The stones are still there. The text still names the peak. So look at where we actually stand with the noise cleared away. 3 answers, and they don't meet. The archaeologist says Roman, 1st century, and the engineering is mostly explainable. And he's largely right. The text says it began on that mountain with 200 of them in the days of Jared, and the text has not changed a single word in 2,000 years. And the quarry says nothing at all. The quarry just holds a 1,600-ton stone that nobody ever lifted. The case isn't closed on both fronts. It's closed on the engineering and open on the coincidence. Nobody has explained why the oldest, most copied account of the giants points at the exact range that overlooks the exact valley of the largest stones on Earth. That's not proof of anything. It's a question nobody has answered. And the reason it stays open isn't that new evidence keeps appearing, it's that the text never moved. Only our reading of it did. For centuries we called it myth, then metaphor, then embarrassment, and the whole time the words on the page said the same thing. A mountain, a descent, giants with names, a pit in the desert. We were the ones who kept changing the label. The document stayed still. So go back to the beginning. Back to the quarry floor in the Bekaa Valley, where that limestone giant is still lying in the ground, half cut, never moved, exactly where it was abandoned. Look up from it, and there's the snow line of Mount Hermon on the horizon. The mountain a banned book, older than we thought, preserved in the oldest scrolls we have, insists the Watchers came down on to father the giants. The official explanation will keep calling it a coincidence. Roman stones, ancient myth, 2 unrelated things that happen to share a skyline. And maybe that's all it is. But the stone is still there. The mountain is still there, and the text still says exactly what it said when someone first cut it into Aramaic. That it started up on that peak, in the days called descent, with 200 of them and the children they were never supposed to have. Nobody has lifted the stone. Nobody has explained the overlap. And the file is still open.